Okay, committee, that will conclude the work session for today, and we will move on to the two bills scheduled for hearing today. And we will open the hearing on Senator Gustafson's bill, which is SB 141. Welcome, Senator Gustafson. A veteran of this committee.
Thank you.
We miss you here, Senator Gustafson. We trust you are doing yeoman's work elsewhere on other committees this session.
That we are, and I'm glad to see you're still here on Judiciary. I really miss this committee tremendously, but there's only so many could be on each committee, so I understand.
Here's your chance.
A chance to present a bill to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 141 to you. I'm going to have my intern, Clayton Markin, will be presenting the bill to you. He's here. He's been my intern this session so far. Will be probably, depending on how well he does today.
Do we vote on that, or is that up to you? How does that work?
There you go. Well, we can work on that.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. None whatsoever. Anyway, Marcus has been with me for a while. He's my intern. I asked him if he'd present this bill, as he would like. He's down here to learn the legislative process and really wants to get involved. So I said, here's a great bill for you. And also I have Dan Lawson from the Nevada Knife Tool Association representing Eric.
Okay, great.
And so I'm going to let Clayton take over here and present the bill to you.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome. Go ahead and proceed.
Clayton Markin for the record. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Clayton Markin, and I'm here today to introduce Senate Bill 141. If enacted, SB 141 will lift the current state restrictions on automatic actuated knives. I would like to clarify for the committee at this time that this is not a weapons bill, but rather a tools bill. The fact that knives can be opened so easily have placed them on a so-called dangerous weapons list, and attaches a stigma to them that they are no more than, in reality, simply tools that function no differently than other knives. What this bill would accomplish is to allow people with disabilities, knife collectors, workers, and sportsmen to use and enjoy tools that can be easily opened and closed with a single hand. This would also allow knife collectors and enthusiasts to start carrying and enjoying valued pieces of their collections outside the confines of their homes. The existing restrictions on these objects is based primarily on fear. That is, the fear of being associated with anything placed on a dangerous weapons list. However, once the blade of a knife is opened and locked, they all function the exact same way. They are tools. Whether knives are used to open boxes in a warehouse, to cut through the plastic packaging that nearly everything comes in these days, or to slice tomatoes in a restaurant, knives are simply tools and extensions of their users. Many people call these blades switchblades as a means to put a use to them, to imply that their use is only to commit crime. By calling them a switchblade and broadly classifying as a dangerous weapon, we completely sidelight any legitimate uses that these automatic knives can serve for Nevadans. People with disabilities or other hardworking Nevadans of any kind can appreciate knives such as these. They are convenient and effective tools that can be used while you have one hand occupied, as is the case with most, if not all, cutting tasks. Many Nevadans suffer from arthritis or otherwise have trouble opening other types of knives and would prefer to be able to use an automatically actuated knife. Hunters and sportsmen often need to use a blade such as this one-handed while cutting fishing line or processing game. 32 states around the country already allow residents to own and use automatic actuated knives. One thing that these states have in common, and indeed share with Nevada, is that they are states with a strong sportsman and recreation heritage. These are working states like Nevada. Passage of this bill will not increase crime or acts of violence, but what it will do is provide our residents with the use of convenient and effective tools that they can use for work, pleasure, and recreation. I urge a yes vote on SB 141 and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. You did an outstanding job. That was far better than we see often from very experienced lobbyists. So well done. Questions from the committee? Senator Ford, please.
Thank you. I'm not certain if Senator Gustafson or your able intern will be answering this. The question I have is, well, I think we'll hear testimony today from a number of law enforcement entities that don't agree with the premises within your bill. I mean, what's your initial response to those concerns? Do you know what those are yet?
Senator Ford, is that the relationship to dirk and daggers?
Yes.
Machetes?
And machetes, right?
Yes.
Machetes.
Yeah, machetes, yes.
Yes, Clayton Markin for the record. We have seen an amendment proposed by law enforcement that would change the status of daggers and dirks within our legislation. At this time, I don't think we are wanting to move on that.
Could you, I think I know what a dagger is, but what's a dirk?
Clayton Markin for the record. Traditionally, dirk is in the Scottish language, dagger. And why they have two separate definitions in our code, I'm not sure. But they appear to just be two words for the same thing.
And then one more question, sir.
Please.
I just have a hard time understanding why anyone should be wanting to conceal a machete. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Clayton Markin for the record. I'm not sure why anyone would either. The problem we face with the word conceal is it's associated with concealed carry of firearms. And that just comes down to the definition of the word conceal. I keep my pocket knife in my pocket because that's just the best place for it. And unfortunately, because it's in my pocket, it's considered concealed. So I don't believe this is a concealed weapons bill. It's mostly just a tool that can fit in your pocket.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ford. I have maybe also a technical question. I see a lot of different weapons listed in the statute. Switchblade, of course, sandbag, metal knuckles, blackjack, trefoil. I don't see trident listed, which, as we all know from the Anchorman movies, can be a very deadly weapon, dangerous weapon. Is there a reason, if you know, historically, I think the statute goes back a few years, why tridents were not included, or?
Clayton Markin for the record, while I'm not sure, we are a landlocked state, so I believe states like California might have more language on tridents. From what I've uncovered, these bills were written in 1959, back in a day when dirks and trefoils, which the only definition I could find was a three-edged sword of the Three Musketeers.
Similar to a trident in some respects, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. It's another bill, I guess, out there somewhere.
Mr. Chair, may I interject?
Yes, please, Mr.
I don't want
Robertson.
anyone to confuse this with Trident gum, which, as you know, takes care of the teeth and prevents cavities. But Wikipedia, just so everyone knows, a trident is a three-pronged spear. It is used for spear fishing and historically as a pole arm. So, just for everyone's edification. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Robertson.
Don Gustafson, for the record, I think that would be kind of hard probably to carry concealed anyway. And also as dirk and daggers, as Senator Ford asked, which one of you asked, what's the difference between the two of them? Well, it's not defined in the language to begin with, so it's very confusing what a dirk and a dagger is. And if it is a knife, and that's what we're trying to do with this bill, is take all knives and lump them together basically into one category.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Yes, sir. Did you have testimony to provide as well, or are you just here to answer questions? Either is fine.
I did intend to offer some remarks, but I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Well, why don't you go ahead with your remarks, and then if questions come up, we'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Daniel Lawson. I'm contributing legal counsel for the American Knife and Tool Institute. It's a advocacy group. There is considerable myth and misunderstanding concerning knives, and automatic knives, or what many people refer to as switchblades, are particularly subject to this myth and misunderstanding. Automatic knives came about in the latter part of the 1800s. A number of the patents on automatic knives were issued right around the turn of the last century in favor of an individual named George Schrade, Schrade Cutlery Company, which a well-known outfit. Automatic knives or switchblades were widely used by the blue-collar people for the first 50-some years of the last century. During the 1950s, various movies began to portray teen gangs, and they chose to arm them with automatic knives, with switchblades. And these were movies such as Blackboard Jungle, Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, that sort of thing. There is no evidence of a automatic knife or switchblade crime wave from the 1950s. This was simply there was a hysterical reaction to the movies, and many states across the country reflexively decided to prohibit these knives, and that's what happened. About 40 of the states moved to prohibit these knives, and the federal government also passed the Federal Switchblade Act in 1958. We're not talking about the types of knives that were seen in those movies. The automatic knives that are available today on the market are tools. They're very wholesome tools, and they're used by a variety of people, particularly people that have some impairment, upper limb impairment, people with arthritis, women with long fingernails like automatic knives. Automatic knives are currently legal in Nevada, provided the blade is less than 2 inches, and this is an example of an automatic knife that has a blade less than 2 inches. And this is, you can see, this is not the mother of pearl dagger type thing that you would see in the West Side Story. We suggest that a lot of the visceral reaction to these knives comes from those movies and from the fact that there's this automatic opening. But we now have the same thing with car keys. It's not this knife is not any more pernicious than any other knife. The same holds true with respect to the other items the other types of cutting tools that would be affected by 141. Dirks and daggers are those are archaic terms. Those go back hundreds of years, and there was a time when more people wore body armor, and it was necessary to as a counter to body armor, people developed certain types of stabbing weapons, and the name of it generally derives from where what country you were in, what language you spoke. For instance, you hear the name stiletto. Well, stiletto was simply the Latin word for that type of an instrument that was used to exploit the openings in body armor. It comes from the same word as stylus. In French, it was the poignard. In the British Isles, the word dirk was the way. Dagger is a common word. These types of things were longer, and they bear no real relationship to what we have today. And the knives that we have today, a very simple kitchen knife today is capable of providing the performance that was expected of daggers and dirks 600 years ago, and that's largely because of advances in metals technology and so on and so forth.
Okay.
There is no evidence whatsoever that any particular type of knife is more pernicious than another or more likely used in crime. The FBI collects data on crimes, and it collects data on weapon use. And in the case of firearms, it breaks the weapon category into several different headings. There is only one heading for cutting instrument, and that's knife and or other cutting instrument. There is no body of empirical data that would suggest this type of knife is used in crime any more than any other type of knife. And the knives of today, this knife, by the way, retails for $165. I bought this knife a couple of blocks down the street at a supermarket for $3.99. And this will do what a dagger will do. And this is not illegal. And this knife or knives of this type are ubiquitous in our world.
Mr.
Every
Lawson,
kitchen.
could I interrupt you and just ask you a question? You raised an interesting point. So what, and if I missed this earlier, please forgive me, but what makes a dagger and makes that knife that you just held up not a dagger under our law?
That's the problem, and there's no definition, and dagger is misunderstood, and it's unconstitutionally vague.
And I don't see, unless I'm missing it, I don't see a definition of dagger among the definitions in 202.265. Am I just missing that? There is none? Okay. All right. Yeah, forgive me for interrupting again, Mr. Lawson. Senator Ford, question?
Thank you. So I just took the liberty of looking up dagger in the dictionary. The Merriam-Webster dictionary says it's a sharp-pointed knife that's used as a weapon. What you've just raised up is a sharp-pointed knife, but I think the intended use is, to cut tomatoes.
It shows the packaging shows a tomato being cut.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And then the dirk, it says, is a long, straight-bladed dagger. And a machete, large, heavy knife used for cutting sugarcane and underbrush as a weapon. I understand what your concerns or your questions are. I wonder, should this bill pass, if you be amenable to a different definition, though, for the exclusion purposes. And I've spoken to a lot of the folks who are going to be coming up and testifying either in opposition or neutral. And the federal government has a definition of a switchblade in 15 U.S.C. Chapter 29. And I wonder if are you familiar with that particular definition in the federal statutes?
I am quite familiar with that definition, and that definition was modified in 2009.
Would that be a sufficient definition for purposes? Because I think some wonder if this were to pass, if the spring blade, the knife you just showed us, isn't that a spring blade as opposed to a switchblade?
Senator, this knife that I held open earlier, the one that has the blade less than 2 inches long that opens automatically, this would not be legal under the Federal Switchblade Act.
Okay. Is that a switchblade or is that a swing, a different kind of blade, a swing blade?
This, I prefer the term automatic knife because
Or snap blade. I'm sorry. Is that a snap blade?
I don't use the term snap blade. I like the term automatic knife, and the reason being is that I push a button and the knife opens automatically. The Federal Switchblade Act was revised in 2009 to allow an entire category of knives that are not automatic opening. Knives that have a spring bias toward closure, but
Right.
which have some spring assist. Those types of knives are not illegal in Nevada
Okay.
at all. And the current Nevada law contains a definition for switchblade, and the definition is a knife that, it defines the mechanism, but an essential part of the definition is that the blade has to be longer than 2 inches. So this meets all of the elements of the Nevada definition of switchblade, except for the length.
Okay. All right, last just point for your information, though, is that the definition being proposed in the bill, while you may use automatic opening or whatever terminology you use, it does talk about spring blade, snap blade, and things of that sort. So if your interest is to avoid utilizing those types of words to describe knives, you may want to take a look at the language you're using in the amended bill here, proposed bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Ford. Any further questions? So, Senator Gustafson, as I read the bill, it's essentially intended to do two things. One is to remove from the list of weapons that cannot be possessed in Nevada switchblades. In other words, to allow the possession of switchblades. That's number one.
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
And
Don
then number
Gustafson.
two, it seems to remove from the list of weapons that cannot be carried in a concealed manner, dirks, daggers, and machetes.
You're correct.
Okay. Okay. Further questions before we move on, committee? By the way, one more. The word slingshot is listed in the statute. Is that a slingshot? Does anybody on the panel know? Mr. Markin, it sounds like you did some research for this bill.
Clayton Markin for the record. I've been an outdoorsman for years. I used to work at Cabela's selling knives. Words like gravity knife, switchblade, these seem to be all just different slang terms for the same thing.
What about slingshot? That looks like slingshot, but I've never seen the word slingshot.
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay. Maybe a second research project for you. All right, any further questions at this time? Mr. Lawson, do you have anything else before we move on?
Yes, in the second aspect of 141 is that it would remove the dirks and daggers and machetes that cannot be carried concealed.
Right. They're legal now to possess, but they're illegal to possess in a concealed fashion. This bill would change that.
Yes, but that there's no intent element in that statute.
With respect to one's intent to do something harmful with them? Correct.
So there's no intent element right now. So
Right. It's
so-
simply illegal to carry in a concealed manner a dirk, a dagger, or a machete.
Yes, sir.
And the bill seeks to change that.
Yeah. And slingshot is sort of a extemporized impact weapon, along the lines of a blackjack. Things like they're not knives. They're impact type.
Chairman, I actually looked it up, the slingshot here. What we have is a maritime tool consisting of a weight or shot affixed to the end of a long cord, often by being wound in the center of a knot called a monkey fist.
I'm familiar with the monkey fist.
Yes, it is used to cast line from one
It's a
location to
Navy
another.
term. I'm
It's
serious.
actually a tool that is used in tandem with a trident for maritime
Okay.
purposes.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Senator Hammond. Mr. Markin, finally, and then I think we're going to move on, unless Senator Gustafson has anything else.
Senator Brower, if I may, this brings up the interesting point I mentioned in my opening of people gaining these biases towards weapons in the movies. As you stated yourself, you seem to seek legislation toward Trident control based on your viewing of Anchorman. And I may only extend that as an example of what I'm talking about here today.
Right.
And I thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Market. Yeah, I was just concerned that maybe, I was wondering if trefoil was the same as Trident. It's been explained that they're two different things. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gustis. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Anyone else here wishing to testify in support of SB 141?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in Las Vegas? Come on up to the table, please. In support of SB 141, go ahead and have a seat, please, and identify yourself and go ahead. Yes, sir.
Hi, Vernon Brooks in Las Vegas, for the record. Forgive my voice. I've been here several days this week, and I don't know how you do it. Originally, I came here for SB 141 to raise a concern about the lack of preemption for knives in Nevada and how effective this bill would be in regard to that. Many of the local municipalities have their own variations on these rules, and they are a patchwork that the end result is it is very impossible for the average Joe to know what is lawful on one side of the street or the other. I'm going to cut my comments on that short because when I got here, I saw that SB 176 brings that up. And as best I can tell, it does so in a satisfactory manner. But I did want to say that I think that's an important aspect of the big picture here.
Thank you.
Comments that came to mind during discussion. I think someone needs to stand up for the lowly machete here. When my original read of this bill, I as well thought it was odd that machete was a topic of conversation since it's not practically concealable, and we haven't seen any waves of machete attacks that I'm aware of locally. In defense of the lowly machete, I would say this. When I go hunting, when I go riding my ATVs in the wilderness, I always have a machete with me for the necessity of clearing brush and things like that. When I'm on my ATV, it's typically strapped to my ATV in a sheath. When I'm hunting, it's typically strapped to my backpack. For those familiar with the context of concealed versus not concealed, it very quickly enters a gray area. If that sheath is strapped to my backpack, I'm probably fine. If that sheath is slid into a pocket on my backpack with just a handle being available to grab, it is probably concealed. In defense of the lowly machete, I think we should observe that that minor difference can make the difference in whether someone has a criminal record or not for hunting with it in the wrong position on their backpack. In addition, since mention was made of slungshot and the monkey fist, this is actually a fairly common keychain in Nevada. You may not have seen it, but it's there are YouTube videos that explain how to make one with essentially a ball bearing and 550 parachute cord. It's very popular as a keychain, especially for women, because it gives them something they can carry that is not doesn't have the appearance of aggression, but gives them the ability to fend off an attacker. That's all I have on that, and thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Very helpful. Yes, sir. Did you also want to testify in Las Vegas? Please take a seat.
Yes, sir.
Please have a seat.
Okay, my name is Ray McKay, and I came in because I was told that you were addressing graffiti. I was wondering when you guys were going to address the laws on that.
Well, thank you. We are not addressing that today. That is the subject of another bill, SB 56, which has already had a hearing. We will likely do a work session to consider that bill further next Friday at this same time. But we won't be taking any further. Excuse me? We won't be taking any further public testimony on that issue during the work session. If you do have an opinion or some views on SB 56, I would encourage you to communicate with your representative, your assemblyman or senator, and make sure that they understand your views. You can, in addition to that, submit anything you would like in writing to the committee, and you can find out how to do that on our website. Okay?
It is what it is.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to testify in support of SB 141? Yes, sir. Please have a seat. Turn the mic on, introduce yourself, and the floor is yours. For 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Mike Searson. I'm an author based out of Sparks, Nevada. I specialize in writing about knives, firearms, combatives. I've had articles published in over 1,000 different magazines, newsletters, blogs, websites. I want to speak a little bit about 176 and 141.
Well, okay, let's try to. Well, go ahead. Speak
go
to
as quick
both,
as I can.
But I can't guarantee I'm going to call you back up for 176 again, in the interest of time. So,
Right.
go ahead, please.
Contrary to popular belief, the automatic knife for the switchblade was invented in the 19th century as a mechanism to allow women to open a pocket knife with their, without breaking their fingernails. Since the 1920s, these have been used by first responders, firefighters, law enforcement officers, members of the military, so they could open a knife one-handed. They were assigned a stigma 65 years ago as a result of an article which appeared in Women's Home Companion by Jack Harris and Pollock titled "The Toy That Kills." As a result of this article, the automatic knife was put into the hands of fictional street thugs in movies like West Side Story, 12 Angry Men, The Blackboard Jungle, that sort of thing. And it was kind of almost a nationwide knee-jerk reaction, to ban these, like, oh, this is what the street thugs are carrying, let's outlaw them, that sort of thing. There wasn't much opposition because actually there were only 2 manufacturers in America who made switchblades or automatic knives at the time. Most of these were like imports from Italy and Spain, and they were kind of cheaply made, so yeah, it's something probably a 15-year-old kid could have afforded. But 65 years later, the automatic knife has gone through, I want to say, a revolution. The modern automatic knife goes anywhere from $150,000 to $20,000. It's not something your typical street thug is going to carry or try to hurt somebody with. A lot of collectors buy these things. A lot of cops, firefighters use them, that sort of thing. As a writer, I've trained all over this country with law enforcement agencies, military units, and as a knife collector, I've asked them, well, what do you run into on the street a lot? You see switchblades, you see dirks, daggers, gravity knives. The number one knife they all say they find is something somebody stole from the Outback, a steak knife, put in their pocket, and they'll rob somebody with that or whatever. The point is, opening a knife with the click of a button doesn't make it any more dangerous. It makes it a little bit faster. I think this is common sense legislation. We've also, like I said, there's 24 companies that manufacture automatic knives today. We actually pushed one of them out of Nevada 10 years ago. Emerson Knives was going to open a factory here. We actually had meetings in this chamber, and that probably cost us a couple of $1 million a year in revenue and probably 100 jobs.
Thank you, sir, very much. Did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, one last thing. I think this bill could actually save lives. This is, popular outdoor state. People go 4x4ing, whatever. If you're trapped in a vehicle, you're turned upside down. You need to cut your seatbelt away before the car collapses on top of you. Do you want to have a knife you can open up with one hand if, your other one's pinned or otherwise immobilized? It's pretty much all I got.
Very good. Thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate that. We're going to take now testimony in opposition to 141. Mr. Callaway? Yeah, and come on up, gents, if you want to come up in threes. If you feel comfortable sitting with those who are up already, please do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chuck Callaway here representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I'm here today in opposition to SB 141, and just for the sake of simplicity, my testimony will apply also to the following bill, SB 176. I certainly understand the need for clarification and potentially a new definition on what exactly is a spring-loaded knife. I know that there are sporting applications and uses for those types of knives, and even tactical uses for those knives. But I do not support the removal of dirk, dagger, and machete. I appreciate the sponsor claiming this is a tools bill, but the definitions that were referred to earlier, and I think it's quite clear that dirks, daggers, in particular, are weapons. They're designed for one purpose, and that's hand-to-hand or knife combat or killing someone. That's the purpose of those weapons. They're not tools. They're not designed for outdoorsmanship or those types of functions. Even I realize the switchblade definition is vague, and if you, when you get time, if you go on YouTube and look up switchblade on YouTube, I think you'll see a wide variety of those weapons shown on there, but the ones in particular that are of concern to me are the ones that are the stiletto type of switchblade. They have a very long blade, and it's double-edged, and it's pointed. The one thing about dirks, daggers, and those stiletto type of switchblades is the gentleman that gave us the very interesting history lesson said that nowadays people don't wear body armor, and that the reason those weapons were designed for was to penetrate body armor. Well, law enforcement officers do wear body armor, and that's exactly right. Those weapons were invented to penetrate body armor. So that is a concern. A single-edged weapon may not have that same capability. A weapon with a shorter blade may not have that same capability. And in regards to machetes, I would encourage you also to look at a couple case scenarios. Machetes come in a lot of different sizes. If you go into the sporting shops, you'll see there's very long machetes, and there's also a short machete that's about not much longer than a Bowie knife. And there was a woman in Las Vegas by the name of Maria del Carmen Gomez, who you might remember a couple years ago was attacked very severely in a parking lot by her ex-boyfriend with a machete, and almost hacked her hands completely off during that attack. So a machete can be a very deadly weapon, and having the capability to conceal one in the hands of somebody with bad intent is not a good thing. In fact, on a personal note, my own stepdaughter was attacked with a machete in Hawaii and almost died as a result of her injuries. So I know firsthand how dangerous those weapons can be. So I would encourage this committee to not support taking those particular weapons that are designed specifically for combat, the dirks, the daggers, and the stiletto-type switchblades out of this law, but I would encourage looking at maybe a new definition to exclude the sports-types knives and the tactical-type knives like the gentleman showed up here at the table today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway. Questions for Mr. Callaway? Okay, Lieutenant Spratly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Lieutenant Eric Spratly, representing the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. It's been said. I agree. We're opposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Chris Collins with the Las Vegas Police Protective Association and the Combined Law Enforcement Associations in Nevada. Through those two organizations, it is my great honor to represent about 5,000 law enforcement professionals in Nevada. Mr. Callaway took a lot of what I was going to say. However, I think it was important that when Mr. Lawson testified, he said, you know, what is the intent of someone when they purchase a dirk or a dagger? I don't think anyone knows the intent but that person, and every day that they carry that dagger, their intent could change. You never know what's going to set someone off in any given situation. Chuck Callaway also mentioned our ballistics vests. Those vests are designed and tested to stop handgun and rifle ammunition depending on the level vest you buy. They do provide a certain amount of protection from edged weapons, but they are designed to be protected from edged weapons with a single sharp edge. That way, if someone is going to do bodily injury to you, they have to cut through the vest and thrust at the same time. A dirk or a dagger, by definition, I know we've all looked up the definition, but it says right in it, a fighting weapon used in close quarter combat. There is no legitimate use for a dirk or dagger other than to inflict injury on someone or some animal. I mean, but in my profession, the dagger or the dirk, sharp on both sides, cuts the ballistic material designed to stop ammunition, not a knife, cuts the ballistic material, and it ends up in the cavity of the officer wearing it. We would beg you to leave the dirk and dagger as prohibited to be carried concealed. Thank you for your time. I'll answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kristen Erickson on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. While we certainly appreciate the intent of the sponsors in the bill, I do have to echo the concerns as indicated by Mr. Callaway and oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dreer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Ron Dreher, DREHER, representing the Peace Officers Research Association of Nevada and the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Nevada. As previously been told by Mr. Collins, we oppose the bill for those reasons, that we would like dirk and dagger out. We didn't have a problem with the machete, but I do echo the comments that Chuck Calloway stated about the stiletto. You have to look at that because it would probably be considered a dirk and dagger if it's used in the appropriate circumstances. But with that, the portions of the bill that we oppose are taking out dirk and dagger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to testify in opposition to SB 141? Anything further from the committee on SB 141? Okay, Senator Gustafson, if you want to come back up briefly to provide any closing remarks before we close the hearing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that opportunity. I do appreciate and I understand the concerns of some of the law enforcement agencies. But my question to you in this committee is, why should we not allow a law-abiding citizen to own any type of knife that he wishes to own? Thank you very much.
And we will consider that a very good question. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Thank you for your time today. We will close the hearing now on SB 141 and open the hearing on SB 176. Senator Selmayr, welcome. Looks like you're armed with a couple of thick books today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd appreciate it if you'd instruct the jury to strike all previous testimony from the recollection so I can move on with my bill.
We're going to start over, are we?
One would hope.
Okay.
Anyways, I appreciate you taking the time to hear Senate Bill 176, which I'm kind of terming as a knife preemption bill. And this bill came about, I have a constituent who has been rather, well, he keeps talking to me every single I talk to him, which has been for the last 8 years, that we need to change our knife laws. Because in some respects, our knife laws are more restrictive than California's knife laws. This gentleman is a knife collector, like there are many individuals out there, which some people may find it odd that some of my constituencies do collect knives and guns and other things, but they do. And as a collector and aficionado, he started explaining to me some of the problems, and that's where the genesis of the bill comes from. Then last Christmas, a friend of mine gave me a knife, and I'm looking at this and I'm going, is this knife illegal or not? Because it could easily be opened with one hand. It was a form of a spring assist. And I question still that under our current law, that may not be permissive. Where the federal government, in 2009, President Obama signed a modification to the Switchblade Knife Act of '58 because he recognized, I believe, that there is an error. Otherwise, why would he have signed it? So in that respect, that's what I'm trying to somewhat address. With that being said, as far as the necessity of a knife that has the ability to be easily deployed, some of my constituencies are getting a little bit older, and they find the concept of a knife that can open with one hand much simpler. We are seeing more individuals, sadly, our vets, coming back without two arms, and so they are more inclined to want to have a knife that opens with one hand. My predecessor, Mr. Hetrick, would probably clearly want to have a knife that opens with one hand. With that being said, I can easily start to walk through the bill and describe the changes that are within it, and I would prefer to do so if that's acceptable to you, Mr. Chairman.
Please do, Senator Selmayr. Thank you.
In front of you, you have what I call my walkthrough, and what I try to do with a walkthrough is clearly list the sections that I'm changing and why. And I thought I sent this to you. If I didn't, I apologize. I'll get it sent to you immediately, and I'm sorry about that. I thought I sent it earlier.
I don't have it. I'm not sure we do, but that's okay. We can follow along on the bill, and you use your walkthrough, and we should be okay.
Within Section 1, the redefinition of switchblade, rather than saying that the meaning ascribed in NRS 202350, by moving it to this section, yes, it does mean that switchblades would be lawful for an individual to carry. In Section 2, it does delete the concept of the belt buckle knife and switchblade knives from prohibitive items to manufacture or possess within the state of Nevada. I find it rather interesting that you legally cannot have a belt buckle knife in the state of Nevada, but having a Derringer belt buckle is completely acceptable.
Senator, can we stop you there? And
Sure.
we're going to, I think at least the chair is going to need some clarification on those two concepts. And maybe you can illuminate that. A belt buckle knife and a belt buckle Derringer, just briefly, if you could describe those two concepts for us.
Sure. Within our law, it states any knife which is made an integral part of a belt buckle. So you'll see individuals that will have knives that you push a button and the knife then falls into your hand, and then you have a knife for utilization. You can look them up online. I don't really think they're very useful or, worthwhile.
Believe it or not, I've not seen that in my district, but I trust you have.
My district's a little different, yes, sir. With that being said, if you look up online, I'll make sure to look it up and send a copy to each one of you on the committee. But currently under Nevada law, it is legal to have a Derringer belt buckle. And yes, I have constituents with those too. So if you can already carry a gun, I personally feel you might as well be able to carry a knife, just an opinion. But that's opinion for you guys to weigh in on.
And so the belt buckle Derringer literally is a belt buckle that
Houses a Derringer
pistol. And
this is Senator Settlemeyer again for the record. Yes, you push the button, the Derringer falls in your hand, and then you have your gun, or your little tiny gun, no offense to it. I'm sure I'll get a few emails from people insulting the quality of a Derringer. But with that being said, it's always interesting how many people are on the internet out there listening to us in all these different aspects. So anyways, the concept of the next one, deletion of the dirk and dagger, there's a reason for that. I'm not touching machete. I don't think you should touch machete. That's my own personal opinion. But the reason to delete dirk and dagger is I consider it to be vague. I consider it to be unenforceable for the following reason. Black's Law Dictionary, if you can find dirk or dagger in here, I'd appreciate it. That, or maybe I'm not spelling it correctly, but I think I am. Go to Webster's and look up the definition of dirk and dagger. So let's first go to dagger. A sharp-pointed knife for stabbing. Okay, well, all knives are for stabbing in some sense or another, but that's the definition. A sharp-pointed knife for stabbing. Dirk, a long, straight, bladed dagger. It's pretty vague. And in that respect, the previous discussion of a double-sided dirk or a double-sided dagger, again, I'll send it to you later, but on the internet you can go buy single-bladed, single-sided dirks and daggers. So I don't follow their definition, because there is none, in my opinion, in looking at Black's and looking at Webster's. So in that respect, I do believe you have an inconsistency of law that would be considered vague and unenforceable, in my opinion, therefore should be corrected. But I personally believe leave machete into that. Within that, another definition I did run across in one other form that wasn't Webster's, it was wonderful Wikipedia, was coming to the concept that a dirk is a short dagger, and a dagger is a form of a dirk. So I found some problems with that definition. Anyways, so in that respect, moving along throughout the bill, it does delete the old definition of switchblade. And again, I think that the concept that the federal law was changed on October 28th of 2009 when President Obama signed a bill legalizing spring-assisted knives brings into an issue where in talking to some of the police officers I've talked to, they say, listen, we run across gentlemen that are military, and they're off duty. But yeah, they have paratrooper knives, which a paratrooper knife is designed to be held at a downward angle, pushing the button. Gravity then allows the blade to fall, and then they pull the button back, and it locks said blade. Is that within the definition of switchblade? But as my friends that are in the police department said, if you think they're arresting any military officer, you're kidding, because they're carrying a gravity knife. So again, I'm just trying to look at that there's been some issues and trying to correct it. Moving on within the bill is the preemption language. We've seen a few bills in this legislative building. Section 3, sir. Section 3 talks about preemption. We currently have seen a bill to try to expand home rule. But in that respect, I don't think, or at least I hope, it is not our desire to have a patchwork of 17, if not more, laws pertaining to knives throughout the state of Nevada. It would be my hope that our discussion of it previously would have enough clarity to create the preemption. But I just wanted to make really sure, because sometimes it's always better to make sure that everybody knows what we really mean, rather than waiting until a session when we have to reinterpret it once again. So again, this is all just discussion about preemption, that the discussion of knives is within the aspect of the legislature, not individual counties. With that being said, the rest of the sections, such as Section 8, just talks about the preemption effective date. Section 9 deletes the switchblade manufacturing permit process. We do currently have in Nevada law, I believe, an ability for a business, if they want to try to manufacture switchblades, can't sell them in Nevada, but I believe switchblades are legal in 43 states or something like that. But in that respect, it would delete that because there'd no longer be a need to have a special license available to go through on a county process to obtain to manufacture switchblades or our definition of a switchblade. And again, that's where I keep coming back. I believe that we don't have a very accurate definition at law at switchblade, and my opinion is just delete it because it's not accurate. But I'm sure we'll have much testimony saying, no, let's just fix it. And again, that is completely up to this committee what to do. With that being said, Section 10 is just the effective date. I could gladly stand for questions. However, realistically, I have a gentleman here who has far more knowledge on this subject than I do. He's from an organization known as Knife Rights, and I would much prefer, sir, if it's okay with the chairman, for him to talk.
That'd be great. Thank you, Senator Sedemler. Very well done. That's very interesting. Sir, if you want to go ahead, if you have a brief statement to make, and I'm sure that there may be some questions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Todd Rathner. I represent Knife Rights, which is a knife owners, collectors, manufacturers, and dealers association. Mr. Chairman, I initially came here today with a bit of a script that I was going to go over and discuss the merits of this bill and talk about preemption and some other aspects. And it seems for some reason now that we're focused on this Dirk Dagger double-edged issue. What I want to address that first, because I've been sitting there jumping up and down in my seat listening to the testimony about Dirks and daggers, and it's driving me crazy, to tell you the truth, sir. Mr. Chairman and members, the problem with this is the definitions. It is nearly impossible to define what a dirk or a dagger is, and that's why people like Blacks never did it. It's almost impossible to define. The idea that a dagger is more dangerous to someone wearing body armor than a kitchen knife is an absurd concept. A kitchen knife, or what we would call a butcher knife, which is, let's say, over 4 inches long and has a big long point on it. We all have them at home. We all use them. Can just as easily pierce modern body armor as any other knife, as any dagger. I also want to bring to your attention that this idea that there is different types of automatic knives in terms of the blade shape and that one is more dangerous than another. I borrowed Dan's knife for a minute because I wanted to show something to you. This knife has basically what's called a swedge or a false edge on it. It comes to a point. If this knife were 4 inches long, it would be able to pierce body armor. That's the truth. You cannot manufacture a knife over a certain length and of a certain thickness that can't pierce body armor. They all can pierce body armor. So it goes down to the intent. It's not about what the tool is, what the knife is, what the weapon is. It's about the intent of the criminal that has it in their hands. And this notion that we can make things illegal that can harm other people is absurd. It doesn't make any sense, because as we see in places like Paris, France, where they have some of the strictest gun control laws in the world, people get AK-47s and shoot up Jewish supermarkets. It doesn't make any sense. These laws are all the same. The bottom line is you're not going to be able to define what a dirk or a dagger is, because there is no definition out there. And if you try, what's going to happen is we're going to see innocent people who carry everyday knives caught up in a legal morass that's going to end up causing them all kinds of legal trouble. And these laws, as we know, from New York to California, disproportionately affect those people who are less educated, who make less money for a living than any of us, because most of us can get out of something like this. But the people that are affected are the average everyday workers, the union members, the guys that work every single day, and they buy a knife and they think it's legal, and then they get caught up because of some ridiculous law that causes them to have something that they think is legal, but some cop thinks is illegal. And by no means do we want to see the police have problems with this bill. We're happy to talk to them about it. But the truth of the matter is you can't define what a dirk or a dagger is. And the knives that are used in crimes are almost always kitchen knives. Why? Because they're available. They're there. They're in everybody's home. Most of the crimes that we see with knives are domestic violence related crimes where a person picks up a kitchen knife that's readily available. And any one of those knives, including the 4-inch paring knife, that's the smallest one that fits the smallest one in your butcher block, will pierce body armor. That's the reality. So this whole notion that we can make illegal those knives that pierce body armor doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test. In New York City right now, none other than the conservative Village Voice newspaper has said over 60,000 people have been arrested for possession of certain types of knives because of definitions conjured up by the state legislature in Albany. 60,000 people have been arrested and some prosecuted and some put in prison over definitions of knives that don't match. And the Village Voice has said that the law needs to be fixed and the law needs to be repealed. A liberal Democrat from New York City is sponsoring the change in that statute in New York because a disproportionate number of his constituents are being prosecuted under vague knife laws. And that is why we need to change the knife laws here. I want to bring up one other, or maybe two quick points. One, the SHOT Show. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's one of the biggest trade shows that comes to Nevada. The Shooting Hunting Outdoor Trade Show. 68,000 people, $73 million comes into the Las Vegas economy, into the Nevada economy from the SHOT Show. There are thousands of switchblade, quote, switchblade knives over certain lengths, dirks, daggers, by any definition, that are displayed there and sold to companies from all over the country. They're displayed there. Do you think every single one of those manufacturers has a permit? No, they don't. People look the other way. This is going to, if we don't change this law, the potential to damage the SHOT Show is there. These people are bringing in knives that are legal everywhere else in the country. They happen to be illegal here. It makes absolutely no sense. We went and fixed the law in Georgia where the biggest knife show in the country is the Blade Show because people were afraid that they were going to get arrested when they left with their dealer samples to go back to their hotel. These laws make no sense. They're not enforced consistently. They're enforced consistently against. They're not enforced consistently. They are enforced in a disproportionate way against people who are at an economic disadvantage and sometimes an educational disadvantage, and they're just plain wrong. And to try to figure out this whole dirk dagger thing just doesn't make any sense. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Very well done. We appreciate the information. A couple of questions. How common is our prohibition? Let's just start with dirks and daggers relative to other states. I mean, is this a common type of statute or not?
Mr. Chairman, Todd Rathner, for the record, thank you very much for asking that question. I didn't think to address that. There are many states that had this on the books. We've repealed it. We've worked to repeal it with legislators in many states. Not a single state has gone back to re-implement those laws where we've had them repealed. Essentially, what's happened is back during the days of bill drafting, when there were newer states, they took the laws from other states, like New York State, Massachusetts, and other established states, and they just repeated them because they figured, well, if it's good enough for them, it'll be good enough for us. And that's how this dirk and dagger and slung shot and some of this other weapons law that we can't even define today comes into play. And some of those states have repealed them, and not a single one of those states has gone back to reverse those repeals of those laws. Why? Because it doesn't make a difference. It's all about the intent of the criminal. It's not about the actual weapon that's used or the tool that's used.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just make a statement. I appreciate your testimony, Mr. Rathner, and it sounds to me like we do need to clean up the statute.
Well, thank you, Senator Roberson. There's some potential confusion, to say the least, as I hear the testimony. Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I
please.
just add one
Sure.
last thing? For the record, Todd Rathner, one of the senators, I wish I could remember who one of the senators mentioned earlier. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was somebody from law enforcement who said some of these knives are weapons. Well, that's absolutely true. And what I would posit to you is whether you think they're tools or you think they're weapons, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's got to be cleaned up. But if they're weapons and you believe that they're weapons, then they enjoy the protection of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And therefore, individuals should be allowed to own them. There is a terrific law review article on our website that you can look at, and you can read the whole thing that talks about knives in the Second Amendment. And knives were mentioned in both the Heller and McDonald cases, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And knives are certainly protected by the Second Amendment. So if law enforcement is correct and these daggers are weapons, then they enjoy the protection of the Second Amendment. And with that, I conclude.
Thank you, sir, very much. If no further questions, we'll turn it over to others here to testify in support of SB 176. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Mr. Lawson? Assemblyman Ellison.
Right there.
Welcome. Been a long week. It's great to see you here on a Friday.
Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead? I know you probably have another meeting to get back to.
I'm trying to get on the road to head home. For the record, Assemblyman John Ellison, District 33. The switchblade that they're talking about, you can buy the little ones right now. In most of the stores in Nevada, you a little push button. I got one on my desk. I use it for opening an envelope.
Be careful with that thing.
Yeah, I know it. They're dull. But the thing of it is, when we were growing up, we were ranching. We always, when we were wearing our chaps, we had a switchblade down in the front, a pocket built in our chaps, or chinks, usually what they were. And when you were branding and you're holding the calf down, you couldn't reach down and try to open a pocket knife, or if you left it open, then you cut yourself. So we could pull that knife out of our chaps, pull the button, and castrate or whatever we got to do, and then we could pull it back down and put it in the pocket of the chap. So we used them for years and years until they come up with a law saying, oh, you can't have the switchblades anymore. So then we had to go back to the pocket knife. But we carried them switchblades in our shop for years, and that's what we use them for, is out on the ranch. And when you only have one hand, to reach down and try to pull this knife out, it was pretty rough when you're doing that. So I support this bill, and I just want to come forward and say so.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thanks,
and
sir.
It's good to see you here, and have a great weekend in
Thank you.
Elko, I presume, and we'll see you next week.
That's it, and we've had a wild week.
We have indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Roberson.
just to comment on Assemblyman Ellison's point there. We heard testimony earlier today that some of these knives' only purpose is as a weapon, and I think Assemblyman Ellison's example that he just gave contradicts that. So I think that's important for the committee to hear. So thank you, Assemblyman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Roberson.
Have a
Thank
good
you. Mr. Lawson, please.
Thank you. For the record, Daniel Lawson. And to follow up on that point, and a point made by Mr. Rathner, who mentioned the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, I point out to you the Nevada Constitution. Every citizen has the right to keep and bear arms for security and defense, for lawful hunting, and for recreational use and other lawful purposes. I don't agree with the proposition that dirks and daggers are uniquely weapon-type tools. But if we assume they are arms that under both the state Nevada Constitution and the federal Constitution, people have the right. And we're talking about people who aren't possessed of any criminal intent. The other point I wanted to make was that, and I'd mentioned earlier, about advances in metals technology. And I may not have made it clearly enough, but the advances in metals technology are such that this weapon, this $4 kitchen knife, has the capability of a dagger of 400 years ago. The steel is better, the temper is better, the edge is better. Our alloys are much better now. Everybody everybody now owns a very effective weapon that will defeat armor, layers of ballistic cloth, that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. In Las Vegas, yes, sir.
Thank you, Vernon Brooks, again for the record. I had just a couple of thoughts on this one. Obviously, the high point of this bill is preemption, and I can't stress enough how important that is. I actually submitted a document for the previous bill before I was aware of this bill, before it was on my radar, outlining the differences in ordinances between City of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Clark County. Try to comply with all of them and travel throughout your day in this city, as I do. I'm self-employed. I travel all day. The end result is my everyday carry tool is a Leatherman, because I believe that I can make an argument that that's definitely a tool first, and hope that that's good enough to get me out of any problems that I might run into. With that said, it's ridiculous to have to approach it that way. In this day and age, anything pointy stabby is more or less the same, and to try to define dirks and daggers and this and that is, I think, just harmful to the constituency. In addition, I do want to point out the belt buckle knife provision. I'm glad to see that improvement. I know it seems like a small thing, but with respect to the senator, I do like some variety in my garments, and my belt buckle Derringer that I have on today, empty, mind you. The casing is on me today in the legislative building. I do look forward to having some variety in my belt buckle choices. So thank you for that, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate your testimony. We're now going to take testimony in opposition to SB 176. Come on up. Welcome.
Good afternoon. For the record, Jackie Muth. I'm the Deputy Director with the Department of Public Safety, and I'm going to testify in neutral at this time since we didn't call for that last time. So this testimony will be regarding both bills, if that's all right. And just very briefly that we are neutral on both bills. We share many of the previously stated concerns, as my colleagues mentioned earlier, but we are still evaluating that, and we look forward to reviewing any proposed amendments that may come forward, and would be willing to work with the sponsors of this as well. So at this time, we are neutral. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Muth, thank you for coming up, and I apologize for not calling for neutral testimony. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Anyone else neutral today? Anyone who wishes to testify in opposition to SB 176? Senator Settlemeyer, would you care to make any final closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving the opportunity to hear this short, lengthy bill today. Sorry your other bill went a little bit longer. Again, I look at this just as a simple fact. We need to try to clean up the laws, in my opinion, since the President changed the law in 2000, late 2009 or 8, as I indicated. That's the issue. He changed it. So he created a situation where spring assist knives are now allowed. And I believe that our laws are in conflict with the federal law and need to be clarified. So with that, I gladly stand for questions. The last thing I'd add on to that is I do think that with the number of individuals that are out there now that sadly are returning in the armed forces with only one arm, what's wrong with having knives that open a little bit easier with one hand? And I use all my knives all the time as utility. The only person I've cut is sadly myself, numerous times. Especially, however, I will want to correct Mr. Ellison's comment earlier. When you use a knife in castration process, I'm pretty sure the calf thinks it's a weapon.
I was hoping we were ending the castration discussion, but I'm sorry I cut you off, Senator Settlemeyer. Say that again.
No, you don't. Don't say it
We
again.
don't need it again. We're good. I think Senator Ford has a question of me.
Thank you. Yes, please.
You mentioned President Obama. I'm just wondering if the definition that the federal government uses would be sufficient for the purposes of our state statute then.
With that, I would like to have Mr. Rathner, if possibly, answer that particular question, because I can't remember the exact definition change they did within the Switchblade Knife Blade Act, but I think it went more along the lines of the spring-assisted option.
Yeah, let me see. It says a knife that contains a spring detent, I guess, or other mechanism designed to create a bias toward closure of the blade and that requires exertion applied to the blade by hand, wrist, or arm to overcome the bias toward closure to assist in opening the knife. That's a definition of a spring-assisted knife. So that portion, as I've heard from folks who I thought were going to testify neutral on this, would clarify in the bill, to the extent it would have passed, what types of spring-assisted knives were allowed. Is that a good definition for you guys?
I'll let him answer after me, sir. Mr. Chairman, through you to you, this is Senator Settlemeyer. I look forward with any amendments that help the bill pass. I would hope we could try to clear it up so that a lot of people out there that are getting in trouble will quit getting in trouble. I have a gentleman who emailed me. He is a officer for the Reno Sparks Airport Authority, and he's telling me that he's arresting people because they have brass knuckles. And I don't think, and he says he's doing it mandatory because it's a gross misdemeanor. And I told him, responded to him, I said, I don't think the law requires you to have to arrest somebody on a gross misdemeanor automatically. I don't think it's an automatic, cuff them. And I found it disturbing that his interpretation of that other section that is within this bill that I'm not touching. Well, we have other individuals out there that could be, in my opinion, harassing innocent individuals, whether they be tourists or not. And I would hope we could provide more clarity throughout. Would that be sufficient? It would be a step in the right process. I personally would like to try to address as many of the issues as possible so that individuals, whether they be kids, whether they be adults, whether they just be travelers to our state, that we try to fix those problems. That would be my desire.
Thank you. Just one follow-up, if you don't mind. I heard I'm sorry, sir, I forgot your name.
For the record.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Todd Rathner.
Mr. Rathner, you gave us numbers out of New York on how many people were arrested and things of that sort. I'd be interested in a follow-up answer on how many folks in Nevada are actually being prosecuted under this statute so that we can kind of get an indication of how dire a problem this really is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Senator Ford, I've asked law enforcement to try to do me a favor and look into some of that in different areas, and hopefully they'll be able to find us some information in that respect.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
They have indicated to me, though, in some respects, though, it's generally beneficial because it gives them another tool to go after someone. That's where I disagree with them. I don't believe we should go in after people necessarily. Generally, if there's somebody doing bad things, I usually figure there's a better way to go after them, maybe for the bad things they're doing, rather than the instrument. But that's my opinion.
Thank you. I think you were going to answer the question about the federal government's definition.
Yes, for the record, Todd Rathner, Mr. Chairman, Senator. The definition, the federal definition is fine. The issue really is whether or not it's legal to possess the item. It doesn't matter really, well, I guess it does matter how you define it because we've been talking about definitions here. To us, as long as you're allowed to possess an automatic knife or a spring-assisted knife, the definition is open to debate. We don't have a problem with the federal definition as long as you're allowed to possess either an automatic knife or a spring-assisted knife. We're fine with the federal definition. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know what the protocol is. I wanted to add one more point, or very briefly, if that's okay.
Briefly. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I didn't talk about preemption when I spoke, and I think that's really important. What we've seen in Missouri and in some other states when the state legislature repeals these restrictions, as they did in Missouri, then all of a sudden we see the cities and towns popping up with their own restrictions, essentially undermining what the legislature's intent was. I think it's important that the preemption issue is addressed, as the constituent in Las Vegas brought up. It's a very important aspect of this bill. The only other thing I wanted to have you imagine for a second is one of the folks that testified for law enforcement talked about these horrible stiletto knives that we see on YouTube videos, and that those were the knives they have a problem with because they're sharpened on both sides. Well, if it's an automatic knife, it's really not likely to be sharpened on both sides. Why? Because when you open an automatic knife, you push a button and it opens up. Now, when you close the automatic knife, imagine yourself for a second pushing the button to close it and then putting your hand on a sharpened edge to close it. It doesn't happen. So again, it points out the difficulties in some of these definitions when it comes to double-edged knives, single-edged knives, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Hammond, please.
Thank you. And I think the example you just gave us, Mr. Rathner is perhaps one type of knife. And some of the knives I think that the law enforcement is referring to are knives that come straight up from the top and then are sharpened on both sides. The one you gave us, the example you gave us, is the knife that comes out from the side, comes up, and then you push down, also known as a comb back in the 1970s. Unfortunately, I did not have one of those, but my friend did. That's, I think you're referring to that. So there are some that do come up that are both that are sharpened on both sides, correct?
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Todd Rathner, Senator Hammond, yes.
With that being said, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate my colleague proving the point. There are so many different variations of knives out there. That's the very issue. And by leaving vague definitions or thinking that we're adding more clarity by leaving in the definition, adding more words, just leads to the problem. We have more definitions. Because as I've tried to forward to you, and I'm sorry, Mr. Ford, I didn't have your email on my phone, I will send it to you. A single-sided dirk.
Okay.
They exist.
Senator, thank you. And just to clarify, your bill, SB 176, does not address the Trident problem in any way. Is that correct?
I know you've been dying to say that all day. Does Senator Settlemeyer? No, sir. I'm not looking at machetes or tridents.
Very good. Anything else from the committee?
Scimitars? What about scimitars or any?
Explain the scimitars.
Scimitar, it's a very long. Never mind. I want to.
Senator Hammond, if you wishes to amend it, you can run that through your chairman, or the whole concept of this. What is it? I can't remember. The slant slung or whatever it is.
Slung shot.
Slung shot, which is basically, it looked to me like a pool ball with a hole drilled through it and then a rope through it.
Yeah.
I had to look these things up once I saw my bill draft and went, what is that?
A subcommittee could be in order on these issues. But with that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.